Mantle doesn't sign bats. The story was he will sign bats only for his kids, so that when he dies, those bats signed by him will be worth a lot more money. I get a call that Mantle's at the Holiday Inn in Louisville, Kentucky. Put $2,000 and $100 bills in an envelope and send it to this fella. He's going to go to the Holiday Inn and have Mantle sign the bat.
All right, welcome to today's episode of the Game Used Podcast, brought to you by Resolution Photo Matching. If you ever have a game used item you're interested in getting authenticated and getting photo matched, shoot us an email at info@resphotomatching.com and we can help you get that submission process going. All right, so for today's episode of the Game Used Podcast, I'm very excited to have him with us here. This is one of the most prestigious collectors of high-end memorabilia in the industry. He has all types of memorabilia, a rookie Mantle card, all sorts of other stuff. But on the game used side, he has an amazing game used collection. A ton of probably 200 plus Hall of Fame game used bats, as well as a number of amazing jerseys. He has pieces that have been on display at the New York Yankees Museum, at History Colorado Museum, and he is also a founding advisor on the Resolution Photo Matching Advisory Board. Marshall Fogel is with us today. Marshall, thanks for joining.
My pleasure, and it's one of my things that I liked, and I'm glad I did, is become a member of your advisory board. I don't mind giving you a plug. I think what you do is better than anybody else on photo matching. I think your characteristics that you use, the details that are expressed in your letters are on the best side of everything. Way to go.
Well, I appreciate you saying that very much, and you know how much we love having you on the advisory board. I mean, it's fantastic. Someone who's been in the industry as a collector for as long as you have, and with as well known of a collection as you have. So I really appreciate the kind words. But enough about us, about Resolution. I want to talk more about you, Marshall, and your collection. So
before you do,
sure.
I made you a in your own mind now that I've given you an endorsement.
Absolutely. The legend in your own mind. I love it. The Marshall Fogel classic. Yeah. I appreciate it. Well, I want to know a little bit about how you choose what you collect. You've been collecting for a number of decades. How have you chosen what you want to get?
Well, there's an art to collecting. It's not like the old days when it was a hobby and cars were a couple bucks or what you could, all of it was very affordable. So the way I think you should collect is if you like to collect more than one subject, let's start there. You collect vertically, don't collect horizontally. What that means is I call it skim the top. So in my collection, let's just take baseball, though I have other collectibles, but not as great in quantity. But baseball, you've got bats, you've got cards, you've got letters, pinbacks, exhibit cards, photographs, to name a few of the major ones, magazines. So try to collect the best of each of those subjects. Now, if you're a guy that collects Brooklyn Dodgers and that's all you want to collect, don't collect so deeply vertically. In other words, you can collect so deep that this stuff isn't worth collecting. So I think you're better off having 50 items that are really high end than to have 150 items that really aren't condition conscious or quality or commercially visible for people to really enjoy seeing what you collect. So,
so it's quality over quantity.
Yeah, in other words, I'd rather see somebody who's got a limited budget collect 50 good cards, of the major characters, than to have a whole quantity of cards, because if they're just not worth the money you're putting into them. So
Yeah.
if it's better to have a Clemente and an 8 than to have 20 cards and 4s of other Hall of Famers.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how about on the game use side? So you started in cards, right? And then did you go to game use after a certain period?
I was in the bats right away. No, everybody thought that I was nuts because they didn't think that it was worth anything. And part of the reason is that we didn't know what was authentic and what wasn't. So what makes this stuff worth money is when you have the appropriate experts, including yourself as a collector, know that what you're collecting is real. So the reason I collected bats from the beginning is because that's the weapon of choice. That's what
Mm-hmm.
makes a guy who's going to remember Ted Williams. Well, he used that bat to hit over 300, or Mickey
Mm-hmm.
Mantle. So why wouldn't you collect that? If you go to art museums, they have swords and arrows and bows and all kinds of weapons. Why not baseball?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. The weapon of the hitter. I like that. And
I can,
so
I
yeah,
can, I
go ahead.
remember back in the day, there were Lou Gehrig game used bats in Sports Collectors Digest before the internet, and the dealer wanted $17,000 for a beautiful Lou Gehrig bat. He had two of them. Couldn't sell, too much money. That shows you the key to this whole thing, John. You got to stay ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I always collect when nobody else wanted it because I knew someday it would be worth a lot of money or it also becomes valuable, I should say, because the demand eventually will exceed the supply. And that's what's
Yeah.
going on in game use bats. How many Ruth bats are there? Maybe 30, Cobb, maybe 25. And, there's more people want that than is available. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why the prices go up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you talk about, getting in early. You certainly got in early on the game used bats, and I think it was like early 1980s, mid 1980s is when you started collecting those, right?
I actually didn't. Through the years, I bought a set of baseball cards. I thought Ty Cobb might have been a dress designer for all I knew. I wasn't really educated, um, but I started collecting in 1989 when I went to my first national in
Okay.
Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I got hooked, and but I was into bats and photos right from the beginning.
And
I
you
picked
went
those.
right Yeah, I was gonna say you went right to the source sometimes, right? I remember I had the pleasure of visiting you a couple months ago down in Denver, and you were telling me a story about how you went straight to the source of this guy that had all these old Louisville Sluggers, right?
Well, that story is one of my favorite because I got to know Rex Bradley, who was the employee at Louisville Slugger, and he used to be the person that would go to the major league ballparks and sell Louisville Slugger bats to the players. And then I met him when he was close to retirement, and uh, if you wanted to know if a bat was real, you had to call Rex on the phone. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to share the records of Louisville Slugger with you. And then you describe what you wanted to buy, and he'd look it up on these 3x5 cards that they had, uh, and tell you whether he thought the bat was worth buying or not. And that's how it all got started. You had to know Rex Bradley from Louisville Slugger. This goes back to the early 90s. Eventually, in the book that I helped Vince Malta write uh, about bats, Louisville Slugger eventually released their records, and that created, the book on baseball bats and how you read whether they're game used, game issued, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, another thing I love from that period, and it might be in that book, is, the branding on the center brand. And I talked about this a little bit with Zane Burns on a past episode of the Game Used podcast. But yeah, talk about how there's different characteristics on those center brand Hillerich and Bradbury and Louisville Slugger logos, right? That can help kind of pinpoint when they were used.
Well, that brings about a story. One thing I like to do here on the podcast is give you the story about how
Yeah.
all this. So, turns out myself, Dave Bushing, and Dan Knoll were into baseball bats, and we decided to write the first book on baseball bats in terms of the center brand, the barrel brand, the different things that you see, vault marks, for instance, so on. And the book was about that thick. It's a little book.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was the beginning of it. Well, even before that was a fellow named Mike Montrevon, who was a clerk of a court up either in, I think, Washington, Oregon. I can't remember. And he was the one that was selling bats on Sports Collector's Digest. And that was the beginning of somebody who had a reputation. And he sort of had an idea of what was a game used bat, rudimentary ideas. Well, then after Noel Bushing and I wrote the book on baseball bats, it went to a new level as to how you know if they're authentic, game used, so to speak. Well, then Vince Malta, who's in real estate in San Francisco, really a good guy, he wrote a book on baseball bats that was even more detailed. But then he decided to do a better job because the records became available. Finally, we got to see the Louisville Slugger records, and you would think that they would be sophisticated. Well, we'll talk about what Louisville Slugger was like when we visited there. That's a great story with Rex Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
So Vince comes to my house because I had more game used bats than anybody else. And we sat in the basement of my house for 4 days, probably. I mean, long periods of time. And what we did is we looked at the lightning bolts on the center above the center brand. Made in USA, Hillerick, J.F. Hillerick and Brasby. So it was a puzzle. It's like the Rosetta Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the bats in his book, I'd say 90% of them are from my collection back when he wrote the book in the 90s, which became the real Bible of finally understanding how it works. Give you an example. 1961, Mantle used a P72 bat. What does a P72 bat mean? Or M110? P72 is Mantle used that bat because he liked the weight of it, he liked the size of it. But P is the name of the player whose last name started with a P.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the 72nd player with the last name starting with P that had a contract with Louisville Slugger. That's how you get P72. Well, I have a P72 Mantle bat. Did I know at the time when I bought that bat what it all meant? Not really, but there's something about luck. Turns out when you look at the Louisville Slugger records, Mantle only used the P72 bat in 1 year. My great 1961. Could it be better? He and Maris was Jason Roof's record.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, it turns out that I wanted to get it signed. Well, Mantle doesn't sign bats. The story was he will sign bats only for his kids so that when he dies, those bats signed by him will be worth a lot more money if you can find a good Mantle bat. I get a call that Mantle's at the Holiday Inn in Louisville, Kentucky, or thereabout. Put $2,000 in $100 bills in an envelope and send it to this fella, and he's going to go to the Holiday Inn and have Mantle sign the bat. Now, I'm not the only one. There might have been 4 or 5 of us who did that because I guess Mantle needed the money or for whatever reason. That's how I got Mantle's bat signed. And that's the story about how it was done.
That's awesome. Yeah, you found a way. The ultra rare Mantle bat signature. You got it done there. And Mantle, that was always your guy, right? He was one of your favorites or your favorite player growing up.
Well, in 1953 uh, was the first year you could buy Topps baseball cards in Denver, Colorado, but you can only get the last series. And of course, Mantle was in the last series. So even then, John, Mantle was a hero. He's 19 years old. He's taking Joe DiMaggio's place in center field, and DiMaggio takes Babe Ruth's place. And here you got this kid from Commerce, Oklahoma, who's going to take Joe DiMaggio's place. So, and of course, everybody wanted to look like him. He was handsome and strong and athletic. So I told everybody in my neighborhood I had the Mantle card. Well, they said, if you don't show us the Mantle card, they're going to beat the shit out of me. So I didn't have the card. Thank God one of my friends did get a Mantle card, and that deflected from them wanting to see the one I didn't have. So in 1989, I had to buy the 53 Mantle card, and I bought it from Wayne Varner. And my first card, Mantle, my favorite player, 1953, all the memories. I sent the card and it was trimmed. Damn it, trimmed. And that gets us started on another story, what I did about trim cards, because I sued everybody. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You found the way to get that 53 Mantle in the end, even though you didn't have it as a kid there. And now, of course, talk a little bit, game use podcast here. We're gonna get back to game use, but talk a little bit about the big one, the 1952 Mantle. You have that as well, right?
Yeah. Well, the, in talking about that, the way I operate is risk and reward. That's sort of, you kind of have to live your life. Take the risk. It's like dating. If you go out with, if 10 girls, you ask 10 girls to go out with you and you get 2 of them to go out with you, that's pretty good. That's risk and reward. So it's the same thing. Here comes 1995. David Hall, who was the CEO of Collectors Universe, underneath that's PSA. he he was going to sell that. He owned that Mantle card that I own. It did not come from the Rosen find. So what happened was, where did the holder come from to hold the Mantle card and all these cards? The holder itself. That holder was invented by a guy named Alan Hager. And Alan Hager he was sort of like Bernie Madoff. He invented the holder and he put his own cards in the holder, but he trimmed them so that everything became an 8, 9, and a 10. I mean, he shouldn't have done it, but that's what happened. Of course, everybody caught on to what he was doing. Well, David Hall owned mainly a coin grading service, which is still part of PSA, Collectors Universe. So it turns out that David Hall, after Hager went down the drain, so to speak, because of what he was doing, purchased the patent rights to the holder for $50,000. I don't think everybody knows this story. Well, in the meantime, David Hall's collecting baseball cards, and he wanted to start a grading service. Everybody was against it because they all wanted to be their own grader. Al Rosen, Bill Mastro, uh, Leland's, Josh Evans. They didn't want one guy making those decisions. So Kate Young has this Hawaii show. So everybody goes to Hawaii for vacation and goes, gets to talk to each other. And Hall said, I'll sell my collection if you buy into the holder and let me be the grading service. Well, that didn't go over too well. So David calls me up. I don't know him. Can I come to Denver? And he said, yeah, he said, I want to have dinner with you. So David all comes to Denver and we go to the poem room. He's going to give me the big dinner and the big shtick. He's going to try to get me on board to get me to do it. He said, well, and he has a habit of getting right close into your face, nose to nose, and you have to tell him you got to back off. And he says, I want you to be my poster boy. I'll grade all your cars for nothing if you endorse my product. And in those days, there was probably 5 of us that were making the run, we buying all the sets. That's how small this thing was from the beginning. So I said, yeah, I'll do that. Because I thought it was a good idea to have grading services because I was getting messed around. I was buying trim cars. The grades were all over the place. And so then from that story comes the Mantle card.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy named Murphy. He's an architect. He got that card that I own, the best card in the world, the 10. He bought that card out of a pack. It didn't come from the Rosenfein. You know why? Because all the Rosenfein Mantle cards that were type 1s, in other words, there was no line underneath the box in the card. Mine has a line underneath it. That's type 2. That was made probably on the second printing of that set because it's double printed. Can you believe that? He bought it out of a pack.
Yeah.
So
that's as good as it gets.
Murphy, these are all ungraded. He decides to sell the set in Wolfer's auction, run by Dwayne Garrett. And Dwayne Garrett was a big political guy. He was Dianne Feinstein's campaign manager. He had a radio program about politics, and he bought Wolfer's auction, which was a stamp auction. Stamps. Who collects stamps anymore? So he decided to make it into the baseball auction. Well, his first auction, he puts his wife on the phone with me, and every time there's a lot being up for auction, because he invented this little auction book that we got, and it'd be like this little book.
Mm-hmm.
And she was on the phone the whole auction, telling me what's going on the bids. So, I think I bought some stuff, but that was the beginning of it. Well, as Wolfers progressed, Murphy gave him the Mantle set to sell. Minimum bid $250,000, including the Holy Grail Mantle card that I own. Not only that, but those cards were incredible. If I wish I would have bought it for $250,000 because I would have had a set worth $80 million probably. With the cards were like a phenomenal. And as Murphy had a great eye. Guess what? It didn't sell. Too much money. What's $250,000 today when guys are buying baseball cards that look like a truck ran over them for $250,000? So Bill Hughes makes a deal with Murphy, break up the set, and the set gets broken up, and it turns out that David Hall bought the Mantle card along with some others, $50,000 for the Mantle card. It was a lot of money. Well, now you know why I told you the first part of the story, because Hall had to sell his cars to get people to realize he doesn't have a conflict of interest because he's no longer going to upgrade his own cars. He's going to sell them. And then people should, and then he's got me on board, and maybe he can make it work. which of course I don't think I was the only one that made it work, but over time, people realized a grading service was important.
Yeah.
So
Got that going.
the car auctions, Superior Auctions, a guy named Buzino ran Superior Auctions. So he got to sell the cards. These are ungraded, but the Mantle cards was graded, and the cards were getting graded. So Hall had purchased a number of the cards out of the Murphy set, including the Mantle card.
Hmm.
I gotta have that card. This is risk and reward. Why Mantle? Why not Jackie Robinson or Hannes Wagner or Lucy Matheson? The risk was I always knew, and I was right, that Mantle would be the king of cards. That overall, anything to do with Mantle is going to be worth more money than anything else because he is the Michael Jordan of baseball.
Mm-hmm. And you got it.
It's big. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, he's right up there with, the reason there's more money dedicated to Mantle is because there's more of his product out there, even though Ruth is a biggie as well. When you look at it, there are not a lot of Ruth cards.
Right.
Just aren't.
Right.
There are a lot of men.
Right. Mantle overlapped with Tops there. And yeah, that definitely made a big difference. But
So we're on the phone. David Hall's got one phone on one ear and a phone on the other ear. Because the bidding is now up to $70,000 for the card. There's only two of us, me and some grocer from upstate New York who doesn't even collect, but he saw the card, he wanted it at a show, maybe the Gloria Rothstein show for all I know. 80,000. I go 85, 90, 95. Now it's over 100. That's unheard of to pay over 100 for a post-war card. It gets to 121,000. And I'm running out of steam here. I don't even have 121,000. I don't have that kind of money to I got three kids, and I'm making a living. Not that it was a bad living, but that's a lot of money to put on a piece of cardboard worth of 5 cents. So I'm at 121,000, and the guy's on the other phone, and I'm yelling at Hall, hammer it, hammer it. Hall's out for the dough, right? So finally, it's like that few moments seemed like a days for me, and because I was done, and I ended up with the card, and I remember telling David Hall, I want to know who was the underbidder because I want to make sure I wasn't show bidded.
mm-hmm.
And he gave me the name of the underbidder and a phone number, and I called the guy up, and he was legit. So now I get hard, but David Hall gave me all the time I needed to pay for it.
I think
and I took advantage.
yeah, that was good of him or generous of him to give you the name of the underbidder. I don't think too many auction houses would do that these days.
Not today,
No.
but it was all. It's like a guy. It's almost like thinking about trading cards in the basement of a guy's house. It was, it's the beginning.
Yeah. The early
They didn't
stages.
have an internet.
Yeah. No, that's
I mean,
awesome. I want to.
if you wanted to buy, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I want to ask you about another Mickey Mantle back on the game use side, and that's your 1968 final season Mickey Mantle home jersey. It was worn for his final career home game. A number of other ones. We were able to res match it. Talk a little bit about that jersey and the significance of that one to you.
Well, after there's a story to be told about you and me. As I got involved in uniforms, I realized that not all authenticators are created equal. And I'm a guy that's really investigates what I do because I'll tell this to every collector. I don't care whether you collect for $1,000 worth of cards or $100,000 worth of cards. Know the history of baseball and you got to be your own boss. These auction houses, they're to sell a product. Okay. It's up to you to learn what the hell you're going to be doing with the product you buy.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure you got to be the investigator. You got to make sure it's real. And there are a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff out there that's not real when it comes to uniforms. And when I started to see your work as compared to other uh, authenticators, I knew that I had to do something because I'm at a stage in my life that I wanted to make sure guys like you continued in the business because there are a lot of authenticators out there in other subjects that are really not authenticators, quote unquote. So, with that said, I own this Mantle uniform. Where did it come from? Came from Barry Halper. What's behind that story? If you went to Mantle's restaurant next to the Plaza Hotel across from Central Park in New York City and walked into the Mantle restaurant, right in front of you, encased is the Mantle's uniform, the pants and the shirt, signed by Mantle, both the pants and the shirt, on display for millions of people to see. That uniform is seen by more people than any uniform Mantle ever wore. Turns out that I got to know Barry Halper, and it got to me that he was willing to sell the Mantle uniform. And I looked it up before this podcast to see what I paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
$74,000 for that uniform. Well, so I always knew I had this great uniform. And then you took it on to authenticate it. And it turns out, you tell them what you wrote.
Yeah, well, it definitely were able to ResMatch it to a lot of different dates. It was 1968 opening day. We ResMatched it to his final career home game, so both ends of that 68 season, as well as at least one home run. I think probably multiple home runs. Yeah, 4 home runs, career home runs, number 5, 21, 22, 23, and 24, I believe. That we were able to ResMatch it to the games from those home runs. But yeah, well, and then also the other one we were able to ResMatch it to was he kept the jersey. Obviously, it was in his restaurant, but he wore it in some old timers games as well. So it was truly his last Yankees jersey, and he just kept holding on to it. So that was awesome.
It has a lot of emotional history because he retired in a uniform and wore it during the time of his career when he broke all these records. So many home runs, his batting average, all this stuff. So this is, again, let me tell you why risk and reward is important. After I won that Mantle card for 121,000, again before the internet, Sports Collectors Digest was the premier place to go to for anything to do with ads to buy memorabilia and cards. They wrote a stinging article what a dummy I was for buying a post-war card for 6 figures. I mean, I got nailed. I mean, I got burned. I got butchered. Everybody thought I was nuts. Well, that was the risk. What's the reward? Well, it turns out there's a story behind the reward. Why do they call my card the Holy Grail? There are 3 10s, 4 9s, or maybe 5 or 6, who knows? I can't remember. All these cards, there were 9s and 10s of Mantle 52, were graded by Mike Baker. Well, it turns out when the cards sold for 9.2 million in an SGC holder a few months ago, it was advertised as the world's most valuable card. I wasn't going to tolerate that because I know my card was the Holy Grail. I mean, I've seen the other cards. So I I decided I would put up $1 million, and the other people with that other card would put up $1 million, and they could pick the graders, and they put up $1 million, and if they and let's get an ESPN involved, and NBC and all, and Sports Center and all that, and let's do it all public. Or you have Joe Orlando write a letter when he was president of PSA that my card is the best card of all the Mantle cards in the world. And Mike Baker agreed to write a letter, which he did, that he graded all the high-end Mantle cards, and mine's the best. It's the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And I got those letters.
Yeah.
And that was that. So that was my reward.
That's great. Yeah. Well, we did. It didn't come to seeing it on the big sports center or wherever it was, but yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, the Mantle jersey, you said you got it for 74,000. I don't think I could put an exact number on it, but it was safe to say multi-millions is what it's worth now. And so these ones that you seemed crazy to buy 30, 40 years ago, looking like pretty good investments at this point.
Well, let's be honest about it. That uniform wasn't worth what you just said it was worth unless you found what you found. I'm not capable of all the information you gathered. That's your job. But you did it in a way in which you dug deep. And so, there's something to say about photo matching, which you do. It's not just photo matching, it's how you do it, how detailed you do it, how many characteristics are unique to the item. And so I think you pass all those tests. And so I have to say that I'm grateful that without having this authenticated the way you did it, it's not only the value of the uniform, but I'm enamored by the historical value.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, we always, for any item we're researching, we're going through that very specifically protocoled research process. But what we find, that depends on the quality of the jersey. And obviously that jersey was, of top quality, used for such an extended period. But yeah, no, it's so cool. As far as your game used collection in general, whether it's the Hall of Fame bats that you have, you probably have more bats of Hall of Famers than guys you don't have bats for the Hall of Famers. You have a ton of them. And then, of course, the jersey collection, you've got the biggest ones, the Mantle probably headlining it. Do you have either a favorite piece or a most unique piece or something that, or maybe a couple that really stand out to you as ones that are a special part of the collection?
Well, I do. I think when it comes to uniforms, uh, I have Colfax, Williams, Musial, DiMaggio. I have others, but I always try to collect. If there's a statue of the uniform in front of a stadium, you want to own that uniform, like or if they're honored on a wall at a stadium. So let me put it this way: there'll never be the history of modern players that could match the history of the older players. there's certain magic when you talk about Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, Christy Mathewson, Walter Johnson, Hank Greenberg, Sandy Koufax, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig. There's a story behind them. It's part of it's so nostalgic and sentimental. I mean, what's more sentimental than when somebody says, "I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth that is dying,"
Mm-hmm.
in front of 60,000 people, and they're all got tears in their eyes. So that brings us to what I consider one of my favorite items, and that's Lou Gehrig's bat signed by him
Mm-hmm.
when he's dying of ALS. And he wrote on the bat, "To Jerry, may you take better advantage of this than I did, Lou Gehrig." When I hold that bat or anybody holds it, it's like you sort of feel a little hot flashes in your hands. It's really, I mean, I'm not exaggerating because when he was signing that, he was dying. And you think about what a great human being he really was. In addition, I have his MVP award from 1936. In those days, they didn't give rings; they gave pocket watches. And Sporting News was the venue that would give the award every year. So I had that pocket watch, and I spent money to make it work. So that's very special to me. Because I don't think there's a greater story than that speech he gave
Mm-hmm.
at Yankee Stadium. You know, Gary Cooper did that movie, The Pride of the Yankees. And Cooper sort of looked like Gary. It's kind of a. I just watched it the other day on Netflix. I tell people to watch it. It's pretty accurate about his relationship with his mother, um, uh, his relationship with his wife, and I think it's very 50-ish in the way it's told, but it's really interesting to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a classic and yeah, classic moment there. And that's an amazing couple of pieces, the MVP award and the bat itself. Yeah. Lou Gehrig, obviously one of the icons. But, kind of in that, he was, as you talked about, probably when he signed that bat, he was looking back on his career and his baseball history. I want you to look back a little bit on your decades of collecting, all of the things you've collected, all of the, you know, people that you've interacted with in the hobby. Um, Looking back on all those decades, kind of what does it all mean to you? And are there any aspects that you're especially proud of or any big lessons that you've learned from all your decades of being involved in the hobby?
Well, I'm reflecting on what your question is, and that is, what what stories can I impart to the people that watch this podcast about what it was like? And I'll tell you, it was rough to begin with because there was so much fraud, so much trivia cards, so much bad memorabilia out there. Um, it got to the point where Bill Mastro came to my house. We became really close friends over the years. He was my mentor. And that's when I learned I had so much bad stuff. And I knew if I'm a lawyer, and I said, I'm going to sue every one of these guys. And I did. I wasn't going to put up with it. So I came to be a sheriff, so to speak. And those were bad times for me, because I spent money, but it wasn't the money so much. It was what they were doing to me and others that were collecting. This is not a good start. And I think I had a lot to do with stopping as much as I could at the time. But over time, uh, I think that what I want to do with my collection, and that is, I'm not like a lot of collectors, where everything I have is private. I don't want anybody to see it. I take the opposite view. I want the community to enjoy what I put together because if that my collection got sold, no, you could never afford to put it back together, nor could you have the means to find all the stuff that I have. Let me give you an example. As part of your question. I have Ty Cobb's passport. That's pretty cool, signed by him twice. There's a picture of his whole family. I have a letter from 1907 from Ty Cobb. He got in a fight with a catcher named Schmidt because of some racial comments that Cobb had made at a game against some black kids, and Schmidt beat him up pretty bad. Well, Cobb won. This is 1907. It's about a 5-page letter, and it's written to a player on the New York Highlanders. Get me out of Detroit. I want to go play for the Highlanders, which later became the Yankees. It's an incredible letter, all handwritten in green ink, signed by entire Cobb. And I had that letter. And so it turns out I have a telegram from Navin. We're not trading Cobb. And then the owner of the Highlanders said to I can't remember his name. I had this letter. Cobb's not for sale. They won't trade him. Don't forget to bring the bats to spring training. So I've got all these documents about this fight that Cobb had. I have letters from Roger Maris, what it was like when he hit his 61st home run. I have a letter from Bobby Thompson, what it was like when he hit that home run, the called shot. I have a letter from Connie Mack, where I can't remember the name of the player, uh, cut a ball from the top of the Washington Monument, stuff like that. Uh, so those are all these key historical letters that I have. So what comes with that are the stories behind it. How do you find it? Some of the advertising piece that I have with Stan Musial. It's huge. It's like, I don't know, 5 feet by 3 feet. It was behind drywall in an old house in Chicago that he had used it for insulation, and it's in perfect condition. Then it gets to, sitting down with Mantle for drinks, Sandy Koufax. I've had Larry Walker to my house, just got in the Hall of Fame. I met Duke Snyder. The list goes. I went to a private party with my son in Las Vegas because I used to go to the fights. Got to sit and talk to Muhammad Ali. So meet these guys and talk to them and display my collection at Yankee Stadium. I did it with the Denver Art Museum. And I know it's important, John, because when we did the one at History of Colorado, not 2018, we drew 150,000 people. This is Denver, Colorado. Yeah. The Hall of Fame draws the same amount. And I've had people tell me they had more fun seeing what I got up, on display. Yeah. And they don't have to find a way to get to Cooperstown.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah, was the for the listeners, when you're done listening to this episode, Google the display at History Colorado. That was where you had all your bats spread out, right, and the jerseys, and yeah, that was awesome.
I mean, I'm happy that I'm lucky. I've got Ed Delhami's bat, Cap Hansen. I have a side-written Wagner bat used when he was a player. I've got some early Errol Combs. I've got Bill Dickey's bat signed by him. He sold it to me before he died. So I think the bottom line is, John, is that when I pass away, that the collection will remain intact. It will be handled by my two sons and daughter, and they'll display it at qualified venues for the public to enjoy.
That's awesome.
I just, it's not gonna. Could I sell it? Like, here's what's going on. Once the internet hit, and the first big deal that happened was when Wayne Gretzky bought the Wagner card with Bruce McNall, the owner of the LA Kings, the Wagner card, at Sotheby's auction. Well, two things happened. Sotheby's got, when they auctioned off the Copeland collection, that brought the whole collectible industry to a whole new level. Sotheby's, that's the big deal. You couldn't get in the place. It was unbelievable. Everybody that had Nathan Mustard on their T-shirts was there. They weren't used to that kind of crowd. And then after that, players started buying. Then Charlie Sheen got involved. Now you could see that the interest in collecting, particularly baseball, because that's such a rich history, kept moving the needle to where this stuff is becoming valuable. The internet, authentication services, it's becoming more sophisticated. Then around COVID, it hit a home run. It became a portfolio asset. People were, instead of buying stocks, were buying baseball cards, particularly baseball cards. Well, then basketball got involved because of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson put basketball on the map. And then Jordan became the Babe Ruth of basketball. So collecting basketball cards don't run as deep. Neither does football. But baseball runs deep in terms of the number of important players that I remember to this day. Unfortunately, people don't remember John Havlicek, Bob Pettit. Some of these great stars don't get the credit they deserve. But in baseball, there's something about the game. Well, now it's gone to a whole new level. Venture capitalists. As long as there's gambling in sports, this stuff is just going to continue to grow. I'm talking more about the vintage material as opposed to the material that's manufactured today.
Yeah, well, it's gone all the way. You've seen it all the way through, from that just such small, when you knew, literally every other collector, and you could probably count them on two hands, to where where it's gone all the way today. So it's it's pretty amazing.
I'm so old that if you want, we can talk about the time I was at Abraham Lincoln's inauguration.
Well, we'll have to save that one for next time, but that'll be another great piece of history from 150 years ago. But well, anyway, Marshall, thank you very much for being on the show. This has been awesome to hear the stories and get some insight from again, someone who has arguably the single greatest collection in the hobby. So thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope your listeners, or your viewers, I should say, enjoy it. And I'm happy to share more stories at a later time. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Definitely love to have you back on. All right. Well, for everyone watching and listening, thank you guys all for checking out another episode here of the Game Used Podcast. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.